Your Mental Health with Aparna Piramal Raje. She's an author, she's a columnist, and she's a former CEO. Her life from all outside looks incredibly successful. She comes from a well-known business family. She is married. She has 2 children. She's a published author, very, very popular columnist for a leading daily, and was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and a leading furniture one. So when you see her, you say, wow, this is everything. This is everything I want to be. However, only a few close friends and family members were aware that she struggled with a serious mental illness, bipolar disorder, for 2 decades. So that's about 20 years. Now she wants to tell her story of how she has learned to come to terms with her condition. She's written this book. So this is a very, very important one that we want to talk about. So that we are going to talk about. It's called Chemical Khichdi. So I love the title. I love the name. It's part memoir, it's part reportage, and it's a part self-help guide. It actually, and I think what is very important, it seeks to remove the stigma that is associated with serious mental illness. It is done in a very empathetic, accessible, and a candid way. And I think even now, when we're talking about mental illness, even though so many people are speaking about it, we're still very hesitant to talk about it. It focuses on 7 therapies and presents a hopeful and helpful pathway to all those with a mental health condition, their loved ones, and also for mental health practitioners, with a message that they can live with a vulnerability, but not only live with it, they can thrive. So welcome, Aparna. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell us, why this book? Why did you want to write?
Well, it goes back several years. When I got a diagnosis, I felt that I reflected upon my condition, and I wrote a note for my family saying 10 things I've learned about being bipolar. And that was after a long struggle of not accepting the diagnosis. I mean, so it was a whole process of accepting it and then writing this note. And then when I shared it with people around me, especially my book club, they said, well, this could turn into a book. And so somewhere I felt that I just wanted to share my story, and I thought it could be helpful for people. So that was really the intent. And there have been books and memoirs about mental illness in India. There are several of them, but I feel there's never enough. So we can always have more conversation around this.
No, and thank you for that, because I think the more that we talk about it, the more that people open up about it, it is going to really remove the stigma. And I will say most of us actually don't have a lot of knowledge. So first, please explain to us, what is bipolar disorder? Because most of us don't even understand what the different types of mental illnesses are.
Yeah, there are several types. Bipolar is something that affects about 1% of the population or less than that. And it also is in the same category as something like schizophrenia. It's a mood disorder, which means there are extreme mood swings where I could be like really up or really low. It's not like these everyday mood swings where, one day you're happy or you're sad or you're a little frustrated, or you have these daily mood swings that all of us happen. For me, it's like I may not sleep for days in a row. I might be talking to myself. I might have voices in my head if it, gets to the psychosis stage, or I could be so depressed that I'm thinking, what's the point of living? So it's really extreme mood swings. And they don't happen all the time, but there are usually triggers that happen. Most of the time I'm pretty normal, and I've actually been pretty stable now for about 4 years. But I think there are these periods of times where these triggers, and they can go on for a few weeks at a time. And it's very difficult for me and for the people around me.
And how does one go about saying that I think I need some help, or I need to get diagnosed? How did you know that, yes, I need to get some professional help?
Yeah, so I started therapy early on because it was pretty obvious that I was going through these mood swings and I was not behaving as I normally would. So when you know that your behavior is a little bit different, where let's say things like your sleep changes, your appetite changes, energy levels change, facial expressions change, when you generally are behaving in a different way, then it's a good sign for families or caregivers that something is happening and we need to see a professional. But in my case, what happened is we were so afraid of the label of being bipolar for such a long time that we didn't go and see a psychiatrist for over 10 years, but we went to a therapist. So it's not that I wasn't seeking help. I was seeking professional help through a therapist. But a therapist is not the same as a psychiatrist. Both need to kind of complement each other. So it was a long time before I acknowledged it to myself. And I think that's partly why I wrote the book, because I don't want people to go through that same kind of 10-year journey that I went through before they seek professional help.
And it's actually scary because the label actually makes us think. And I want to come back to that because this negativity, and especially I think you raised the question, will you get married? Can you have kids? Can you run a business? We deal with a lot of, we're first dealing with the mental illness, but we're also dealing with a host of issues that surround us and say that, will I be able to live a normal life? But as you say, you can thrive also. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of these issues happen when you're a young adult, maybe when you're a teenager, a little bit older, or in your 20s. And those are also the times when you're making some important life decisions, right? You're finding a life partner, you're getting your first job, you're figuring out your career. So they go hand in hand. If you're showing these mental health issues, or if you're dealing with them, then you start questioning your ability to do these things that all of us consider to be quite basic. So I think because at the time there was so much ambiguity about whether it was my personality or whether it was my illness or what was actually going on, I just sort of carried on with my life. But there were definitely times in which I felt like a failure, like I felt that I wasn't able to do the things that I wanted to do because of my health issues. I've definitely been through that path. And I've learned, that's why I write in the book, I've learned how to hack it now, to figure out what is it that I can do and what is it that I can't do, because there are certain things I can't do. I can't pull in a 10-hour or 12-hour day. That's not something. It's better for me to accept that and adapt to it than to try and push myself into a box that doesn't work for me.
And I love the fact that you call it a hack. And I would love to understand these hacks, because you've come up with actually a 7-point plan. There were many different things that you saw that actually worked. Tell us a bit about this.
Yeah, so I thought, I just reflected on my life, and I thought the 7-point plan is really drawn from everyday life. So these are all things that affect each of us, whether or not we have a mental health condition, whether or not whatever background we come from. It's about the role of the family, the role of the allies in your life, whether those are your friends, the role of the medical professionals in your life, the role of work, the role of your lifestyle in terms of sleep and exercise and food, and then the role of spirituality, if that's something that you are drawn to, because that's been a very important part of my healing and recovery. And then most important, I think, is the conversations that you have with yourself. So the self-talk and the internal dialogue that we are having, that's really an important part. Now, all of these things are things that even if you don't have a mental health condition, even if you're not depressed or anxious, but frankly, which of us are not different? I mean, at some point or the other, we are all depressed and anxious, So, but these are all things that can help us. So they're not things that are very fancy or new age or inaccessible, but things that are very, very important for all of us.
But did you receive a lot of resistance when you wanted to tell the world about your story? Because again, we live with a world of a lot of stigma and people saying, oh, and especially we deal with a lot of this. And how did you deal with that?
So I think there were some people who wondered whether I could pull it off. That one of my mental health practitioners actually told me that you should be your write-up was very good, but you should be writing for your Mint column, and you should be you're good at planning the children's holidays, so why don't you plan the children's holidays? And your husband has such a busy schedule, and you should kind of accommodate that also. And so he was quite patronizing, and I felt very upset about that. But I really have I really believe in like girl power, and I kind of immediately formed a WhatsApp group called Bipolar Girl Power. And I said, guys,
nice.
I need help. And this is what I've been told, but I want to do my writing. And so these friends of mine really supported me. I think my family were supportive, but like I said, they really wondered if I could write it, because to write a book like this, you do have to go back and revisit the past and whatever happened.
Memories too, probably.
So you have to be in a place where you're sufficiently detached enough to write it. I did try writing it a few times, and I wasn't kind of detached enough from the material. So I think it was only when I got that sense of being, having sufficient distance from the material that I could write it. So I think that was the skepticism perhaps on some of my family members' part.
No, but thank you, because I think so many people will benefit, but also people will say, but you're so privileged. You have everything. You have a lot of resources. How can this help also the common person who will say, you know what, I don't have all of that?
Yeah, I think that that's a very, very valid question. I've tried to address this upfront in the book. There are examples in the book of people from rural communities in Gujarat where there are nonprofits working to helping them to get the mental health they need by training villagers to be champions of mental health. Even for ordinary people, there are a lot more helplines and therapists who are offering therapy at far more subsidized rates and counseling. So I think a lot more services are available for young people. There are, really good sites now where you can look for counselors who really are very understanding of young people and their issues and the context in which they come from. So I think what I would say is that these therapies really apply to everyone. They're universal, but the context will differ on how they're delivered. And the book contains a lot of resources and listings and names of places where people can access help more freely. So that's the one thing. But I also think it's really important for the individual to make the effort. Like I confided in a lot of my friends about my vulnerability over a period of time, and they really were able to help me. And it's because I had developed those relationships. They were able to reciprocate. I had a number of good friends who I have helped in the past, and they were more than willing to help in the way that they could. So I think those relationships are really, really important when you're dealing with something like this, because mental health is a team sport. And, I think most people don't realize that you need to ask for help. Yes. And most people find it difficult just to do that. So I think it's not enough to say that I don't have access to resources. Yes, there are. And if you look around you, you will have more access than what you actually think,
And I think the main thing is when we think about mental illness, I think we come back to the question of stigma. You spoke very openly about it with your husband before you were married, but most people are worried if they get labeled, they will not be able to get married. They will not be able to. So they don't even want to disclose it or accept it. How do we remove the stigma part of it, that it's okay?
Well, by doing what we're doing today, by normalizing the conversation and by saying that, it's okay to go to a psychiatrist, it's okay to take medication, it's okay to see a therapist. And, it's a normal part of life. And I think which of us are not on the spectrum in some way, shape or form. My issues may be a little bit more severe or extreme but all of us go through some sorts of mental health challenges at some point in life, because we have triggers, we have stresses. So I think it's just a question of saying that, this is something that we all need to manage, and we can learn to hack it, as I say. So the more conversation and sunlight around it that we have, it's a bit like saying, sometime back we all had these vitamin D tests. Yes. And we realized that we're all insufficient in vitamin D, right? And then we all need to get ourselves to get those pills or injections or whatever is required. So it's a bit like that, just saying that mental health is at that same stage. We're all realizing that this is something that affects us, particularly after the pandemic and everything that we've been through. So it's good to just have a conversation about it.
No, very well said. And one of the things that all of us are very afraid of is, how do we support someone? Because we're also afraid, because we don't know, should we ask this? Should we say this? Because, there's so much information. How should one, when they are part of the caregiver, like you said, you need a whole community. What is it? And is there an appropriate way to support somebody that's going through this?
Well, I think, first of all, to start off with, I think you would support someone the way you would support someone who's going through a down phase. Like, how are you feeling? Is there something I can help you with? Do you want to share with me? Like, those are ways to start off. You wouldn't start off by asking them, I think you're depressed, or I think you're anxious, or I think, you've got ADHD or something. You wouldn't start off by that. But just by being a very good listener, I think that's just a very important, by listening without judging and providing a sense of empathy. And, very often the family members are not in a position to do that because they're so close to the situation that they actually just need to fix the situation, and take that step. But an outside person can actually really listen and be that person that somebody can confide in, and then help if required, like if they need help going to finding a doctor, or going to a practitioner, or finding a therapist, or but just being the person to listen to. I think we're so caught up in our own lives now that we don't have the time to be good friends in many ways, to listen to each other. So I think that listening itself is an art form.
And I think you said it well, listening and being non-judgmental, both of those things we keep in mind. Any last things you'd like to tell us about chemical khichdi? How should we use it? How can people benefit from it?
Well, I would love it if people have conversations with the people around them about it. That would be, incredible if people share it with people who they think could benefit. I think all of us could benefit, because I think there are some life lessons that could help everyone. That's the feedback I'm getting. But I think the biggest message really is that you can live with any sort of vulnerability and learn to thrive with it, and I think we all have some vulnerability or the other. So I think just that being able to live with it and thrive with it is the message of hope that I really want to share.
So beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for being so open, because I know it is a difficult topic, and it's great that you are actually spreading this message. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.